Hi everybody, hope everyone's having fun, having a good afternoon so far at the festival, and I'll be short. I know it's we're approaching happy hour and we're at a brewery, so it only just makes sense to speed this along, and some of you have already started, so that's good. My name is Phil Canfer. I'm the Director of Partnerships at Wired NYC. Wired NYC is a certification platform that helps people like yourselves identify the best connected office buildings. I'm here to present the panel on workspace design, and while Wired NYC is not a design company, we do care very much about your workspace flow from a connectivity standpoint, for you and your businesses to succeed properly. In short, Wired NYC, we're an NYC EDC developed certification platform that assesses and validates the internet connectivity of office buildings. So really, what does that mean? We really help you identify tech-friendly office buildings that have the capability to support anything that you're doing, whether you're a tech company, high-speed trading firm, law firm, whatever that is. Through our certification program, we've created an official set of standards to properly rate buildings. So prior to you signing a lease, or better yet, in your initial building search, you have all the information about a building's internet capabilities at your fingertips. Things like, is there fiber in the building, and is it distributed properly to my space? Is there a backup connection or a redundant connection? And are there multiple providers in my building? Now, all these are critical questions that should be asked during your office search. The common perception really out there in the marketplace that this is New York City, it's 2014, and all the buildings in New York City are created equal and they'll be able to easily support my connectivity needs. Far from the truth. And I could assure you there's a bunch of you out there that probably have some of your own war stories as it relates to connectivity, and I see you nodding along. Perception really is not reality. The glass and steel building on 6th Avenue that has the look that connectivity should be the least of its concerns could have really poor connectivity. And the pre-war building on the side streets, right around here in the 20s and the 40s in New York City could have perfect connectivity to support some of the best companies in the U.S. Since inception, less than 9 months ago, Wired NYC has certified over 100 buildings in New York City, educating owners, landlords, and brokers along the way on the importance of connectivity. This is an industry that is notoriously slow to adapt to the tech and innovation of all your businesses. A lot of them are running on IE4, and really have a hard time getting the message that connectivity is important to our landlords or to our businesses. They're waking up slowly but surely. At the end of the day, our goal really is to ensure that you can come into work every day and focus on what's best, being innovative, being creative, and really helping move your business forward, never worrying or caring about how the connectivity is going to impact your lives. If you're curious to know a little bit about what we're doing, come check out our website. It's WiredScore.com. If you're in a property, and for some of you that are nodding along, that internet capabilities are a concern, I definitely urge you to contact your landlords and ask for them to get certified so that they could really have your business goals in line. With that, we are actually hiring. We're taking our platform out to San Francisco in the next couple months and Chicago. We're really excited about that and doing a lot of work in Brooklyn here today. So definitely come check us out. And with that, want to leave it over to our panel over here and Seth, and we'll get you going. So take care.
Thank you all, and thanks for coming. I'm Seth Stevenson. I'm a writer with Slate. I write about a variety of topics, including workplace culture and the psychology of management. And so this is our panel on workspace design. I'm going to let our panelists briefly introduce ourselves before we get started. We'll start down at the end.
Hi, I'm Sophie Kelly, CEO of the Barbarian Group.
I'm Miguel, McKelvey, the co-founder and chief creative officer at WeWork.
And I'm Amanda Carroll, design strategist and technology leader firm-wide for Gensler, an architecture firm also global.
So the evolution of workspace design, you may remember if you've watched movies from the 1930s or 40s about workplaces, you have offices on the outside with executives, usually men, and then the inside you have the secretarial typing pool, which is this big open space full of workers. And then we had, by the mid-century, the action office, which is a fancy word for cubicle. And that started to dominate workspace design. And more recently, we've moved back to open plan offices with all sorts of different justifications about collaboration, or maybe it's really just fitting more people into the same space. We actually replicated this evolution at Slate recently, where we went from the cubicle to the open plan office design. It was sold to us as an advantage in collaboration. Actually, I think it's been a great improvement on the cubicle design, which I don't think anyone was a fan of in our office. So I'm going to open it up to our panelists now and ask them to tell me and you your own stories about workspace design. So Miguel, we'll start with you.
It's interesting to be in this brewery here today because when I started the first company, a startup that was trying to teach, help people learn English as a second language, our first office was actually in a brewery, and this is Bridgeport Brewery in Portland, Oregon, and it literally looked almost exactly like this. And I realized part of the reason why we had an open office was because we had no money. And we couldn't afford partitions. We had, desks that we made from pieces of plywood and like sawhorses and things that we got from IKEA that were inexpensive. And I think that startup mentality that comes with just trying to figure it out as you go along, that sort of DIY vibe, is something that was organic. It came from the situation that people were in, and it resulted in an aesthetic that people started to idealize. So first, it was necessity. You couldn't afford an office in an expensive office building, so you went to the former auto garage or brewery or whatever it was and sort of fit in where you could. And then that became something that felt creative and interesting and inspiring, and sort of grew into a movement. When I came to New York, one of the first things that I found was that real estate was much, much harder. Like, it was in Portland, everybody's nice and there aren't like sharks, brokers who are like, maybe there are, but I didn't experience them in the same way that you experience them here. And it was just sort of easier. Like, you could find a space and rent it and it was not a big deal. But when I had my first entrepreneurial experience in New York, it was really difficult. It felt like a great challenge to find a space that was cool and inspiring and easy to get into. And so when we created WeWork, that was, that enabling moment became the foundation of what we were trying to do. So the design wasn't necessarily like, hey, we're trying to make the coolest design space. The real function was, how can we enable innovation and creativity? How can we create a design that allows people to get through that early stage where it's very difficult to bridge the gap between sort of, I have nothing and I'm working in a coffee shop or wherever that is, to I need to actually become more serious and more formal in the way I work. And so that's what we try to stay true to now, is it's not sort of as much of a sort of scientific approach about encouraging collaboration or whatever. It's more just having that spirit, that underlying spirit that we're enabling people to do, to be creative and innovative and inspired.
I guess when I think about workspace design, I think everybody's been into a company and interviewed and walked through the door and had an impression of the place. And I think sometimes we take for granted that the way we design our environment needs to be a statement of the type of company we are, and causes, has a big impact on how someone feels when they walk through the door. I think my experience with workspace design is a very recent one, and my first, and was brought about when we were forced to move out of our offices. And the initial feeling is, oh dear, we've got to actually change offices and we've got to move 125 people and we've got to create this. And then you sit back and think, we're a creative company. This is actually the most exciting project we could have on this year. So it was a wonderful experience to actually have our own live creative project be about the design of our environment for the next 10 years. And it was very exciting for us. There were obviously some nerve-wracking times, but I guess what we were determined to do was to create a space and environment that was a reflection of what we did and what we wanted to stand for and the type of talent and culture that we wanted to foster, which is how we got to the biggest desk ever.
So as a former designer myself, I've done a lot of workplace designs. And what's interesting to me actually about both of the projects are that you're leading, right, we would say, and Miguel, you more so multiple, but was this notion that tech has really taken the workplace to a different sort of frontier. And we say that internally at Gensler that tech sort of doesn't start trends, it creates them. And what tech has done for the workplace and media in that similar vein is that this notion of any rules of sort of order hierarchy have been eliminated. And because you do have a workforce that's typically coming from, in its past, exposure as a professional, unconventional work settings, those people are more comfortable working in unconventional ways and actually sort of thrive off of them. The danger is, though, if all of the unconventional ways come together and there's just too many different ideas. But I think when you see really good, successful examples, they're ultimately what people are perceiving and sort of judging as success are environments where a culture comes together. And we might say that's something sticky about it. You don't quite know exactly why you like that neighborhood. You don't quite, but there's some sort of mood or vibe or feeling, and you want to be a part of it. And more so, you see that being a trend that's kind of pervasive in all industries.
An intriguing detail, and then just you need to explain what the biggest table ever is.
Yeah, so when we approached the design of the office, and I talk about how it was very important to get something that we felt would excite and really be something that our culture was proud of. So we had a very collaborative process, and I totally appreciate the point of too many people involved in trying to design something. But what we did was we did a survey of all of the staff and asked them if they could have all their dreams and hopes in this new environment, what would it be? And then on top of it, functionally, what was missing from the environment that they had today? And we ended up we were very committed to the fact that we wanted it to be open and a very fluid environment, but that we wanted the environment to make a statement about what we did creatively, that we're a company that stands for innovation, that we're a company that has high respect for design. So we got to the brief of everybody sitting at one table, because we have a very democratic culture. And then it was from there that we started to find our partner, Clive Wilkinson, and he came in and worked on, we have a desk which has its own Twitter handle and everything else called the Super Desk, and it is now as much a character as any of the other characters working in the company. And it's a 1100 length, goes all the way through the office. It goes from the ground to the ceiling. It has meeting spaces within it, and it curves to separate, if you like, different working sections of the office, but it is one continuous surface. It looks a little like a skateboard.
So it seems like, so that's obviously, a design encouraging people to feel like they're collaborating, they're all part of one desk, sort of. And it seems like the big divide, the major dichotomy in workspace design is between offices with doors that close, or the wide open plan office like you're talking about, although it sounds like there are some nuances there. We at Slate just have these open desks. There's absolutely no dividers at all. And then the happy medium of the cubicle, where you have these sort of half walls that you can hide under or pop up over. How do you all balance the demands for privacy? Maybe you need to make a phone call. Maybe it's about one of your employees. Maybe it's something that not everyone in the office needs to know about, versus that mandate for collaboration and letting people sort of know what's going on with everyone around them through osmosis. How do you balance those two competing concerns?
Can I go with this one first? Okay, so I think everyone recognizes the nature of work is so much more complex than it was even 5 years ago, and beyond that, people that are still in the workforce at the higher end of the workforce today can speak to its evolution, but everyone's doing multiple jobs. Right, so it's not like you're interfacing with one telephone or with one computer. You're doing maybe 14 different roles in any given day, and the assumption that one desk can accommodate 14 different roles is the wrong assumption. And so people need choice and they need variety, which means that the workforce today is becoming more like a landscape of a kit of parts where somebody collaborates away from their desk, or they take a private phone call in a space that's not theirs, it's shared. And that's sort of sharing economy that was actually spoken to in the panel before this, I think is a really big part of like why this is all possible, because people are starting to understand that they can get more. If there's more we and there's less me, then they have a better experience. And then, using that as a way to sort of drive office culture, I think is where we've started to see, at least at Gensler, the most success in terms of workplace productivity and efficiency, because people are able to sort of define the way that their day works, when, where, and how.
Just to add on to that, I think I talked about doing this survey with people as we developed, and the process of designing the office was very much a transparent one with everyone working in the agency. And the important thing about what we did was we had a vision, if you like, everyone sitting at the one table, but when we designed the table, as it moves and it shapes, there are telephone booths within the construct of the table. There are meeting rooms within the construct of the table, and around the outside of it, there are various different size working rooms for people to go into and do what they need to do. And so all of the functionality was built into it, and it still has a feeling of you can walk into any particular part of it and take your space, do what you want in it. The inside of the table is actually raw wood, and it forms, if you like, either in one part of it, an art gallery where people have just gone and put things that they've made or they've worked on. In another part of it, a bookcase where people are keeping reading. So to your point about leaving room for personalization and customization as people start to live in the space, it's really important. I think it's also important to have a vision of what you want that to be that fits the type of company that you are and the work you do. I mean, one of the key things we wanted was, we're a creative agency, so when everyone came into the space in the first time, we really wanted to see a sort of sense of childish creativity about how they were going to run into the space and discover it. So we didn't say you're sitting here, everyone just sort of ran in and ran around it and discovered it and found things that they wanted to work with or have. So I think that sense of sort of childish discovery works for us, because part of what we want to do is just keep pushing the fact that people can explore and create and make whenever they want.
Have you guys experienced any super annoying people that didn't work in that environment? Like anyone who just had a laugh that just grated on everyone's nerves or anything like that?
No,
and also,
never.
But I mean, is that does the solution become prescriptive? Do those people adapt when they're then put into an environment where it's no longer socially acceptable to be annoying?
So, having designed a lot of spaces, I can confidently say that that's going to happen every single time. There's always going to be somebody in the organization that's just not sort of socially aware. But as a leader, I think most organizations that are successful, you're able to sort of refine workplace behaviors by actually communicating what's expected, which for many decades never was done. No one really explained to people how to use space, and therefore people used it in the wrong way, or they didn't use it at all, or things sat underutilized. And I think the more that we evolve as an industry or culture in designing spaces that are really intuitive and user defined, the same way we would expect our technology to be, the less you start to find the people that are sort of a bad disruption. And so if you're able to provide really smart solutions that even a child could figure out, then you're probably on your way to eliminating some of that.
I think on that point, you do become completely aware of everyone's habits and character and personality, which I think is a wonderful thing. And on the positive note to that, yeah, you have, bad behaviour is much more visible in an environment like that. But I think what I've witnessed is, I was totally surprised when we resurveyed people and we had no complaints about the space. I thought for sure we would have complaints about the space. We did have one complaint. You have to get to the women's toilet you have to go past the men's toilet to get to the women's toilet outside, and all the women don't like that very much. But no, the thing that I have noticed is that because it's such a transparent environment, I think people are more conscious of their behaviour and the impact it has on the environment than they are in an office environment. Because you know what? They're not being judged by the one person they're having their interaction with. They're being judged by half a floor. So I've seen, more consideration and better behaviour, and I've seen, whereas in the past people would come in and complain about people, I've seen a lot more real-time conflict resolution happening in a collaborative way than it did before.
Thank you for asking the question about the socially grading employee, Miguel. 'Cause I think the dream of the open plan office is you're going to have all this collaboration and people talking to each other and these great conversations over the desk. And then the somewhat less dreamy reality is row upon row of people with headphones on, ignoring each other and trying to drown out the noise. And so sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work quite as well. My next question for you when you're thinking about designing workspaces is, what is your time frame for these? How long do you think that this workspace design is going to feel relevant? At what point will work have changed to the point that it's no longer relevant to you? Or maybe your office becomes more project-based or less project-based, or maybe you have more people telecommuting or less people telecommuting. And how do you think about how this is going to age and and building in flexibility for that?
Well, I was going to say for us, that question is really important because we're not a headquarters in the sense that our employees have to come to our office no matter what, right? So when we're offering space for all of our creators that we work, they have the choice whether to come to us or go somewhere else. And so this idea that we're at the forefront of either what's cool or what's working for innovative creatives is a challenge from an actual business perspective. Like, we have to continue to do well or else they'll stop coming and then our business won't work anymore. And so we've had this sort of rapid expansion. We've built a lot of buildings, and now we're at a point where I really want to go back and say, well, did we do it right, for one? And then two, what's it going to look like next year or 2 years from now or 3 years from now, and will it still work for all the people that are there? So I think everyone who's investing infrastructure or investing money into office infrastructure has to ask that question. But I would say for us, it's even more pertinent because it could become a point of failure. So hopefully we're going to solve it. I don't know what the answer is, but I think that the primary answer is that diversity of options. There's no doubt that it's only going to continue. Like, there's people in our office who work on like a pile of shipping pallets with some cushions on it, which I would never do. But some people sit there for 8 hours straight. So many different ways that people work that it's just going to be utter, diversity is the only solution. There's a funny thing I think about this social, people's comfort socially, because on that stack of pallets, there's also people who literally sleep dead, asleep, for 2 hours, where you probably could, and I've thought about it, what if we were to move them to some random other place, and they'd be shocked when they woke up, because it's not normal to just, if there was a guy sleeping on the bench over there, and here we'd all be kind of looking at him what's that guy doing? But for him, I guess it's normal. I don't know.
So I kind of jumped on this question only because this morning I was in Dumbo, and we just got out of a meeting, and we're designing the headquarters for Etsy, and a client, we were talking about sort of, what's that next vision for them, and they're growing really fast, and obviously have a lot to think about for the next, big things they're going to do for their headquarters. And we just came to terms on the sidewalk as it was raining, and my cars are flying by, getting splashed, and we're like, you know what, it just needs to be reprogrammable. That's the answer. it actually doesn't even matter today what the program is, what the number of people are, what the metrics are. What matters is that it's always going to be evolving, and when it fails is when it can't do that. And so there needs to be a really amazing recipe that's specific to their culture, that's going to, be able to meld with them as they grow, and also maybe help them shape that. And I think it does come together when, in a way, around one idea, like you were describing with this skateboard. But the real moment of truth is whether or not you can let it go. And so we were talking about, so the day the office opens, it's this beautiful thing, and you feel like, it's so fantastic, this shiny new thing. And then you have to figure out like a way to come to terms with the fact that the people will take it over. And that's really, I think when you've got something good going and somebody's sleeping on pallets and doing things that were unexpected, and they're able to do that and they feel comfortable doing that. And then that's when you start to see, like, if an office can really patina in that way, then you plan for it to be, defined by them and your culture.
Yeah, I think I actually think that's, in some ways, a harder stage that we're going through at the moment than the actual whole design of the initial phase. But we have deliberately decided that there needs to be places and people who want to create things that go on the walls or measure the energy level of the office, and that just has to be added to the environment, And we're seeing a few random things, but I mean, part of having a culture that's defined by people, having a company that the culture is so important to, is letting them loose in the space. So you've just got to go with it and have some kind of, monitoring of it, I guess.
So let's speak some uncomfortable truths. I think, if we're all honest with ourselves, we would love to all have our own offices with doors that close and windows and beautiful plants on the windowsill. And generally, the high-level executives, probably at most of your offices, maybe are the people who have the offices with doors that close, and the lower-level workers don't. How much, that's actually not true at Bloomberg. That's one place where some of the C-level executives actually sit at open plan desks. So how much of this is about economics? How much of the open plan office trend is about cramming more people into the same space?
I mean, I think at this point, very little of it is actually driven by the metric around the real estate, though it's, an organization's second largest expense. The real estate would be the number one, but is the talent. And I think all day long people have just been talking about how much talent is here in New York, and that's why you're in New York, and this is why we do what we do. But it's the hardest thing to get, right? It's like out there, and it's the kernel that's like going to either make or break you. And so people are focusing now more on, while there are certainly really very real and relevant economics to consider around the real estate that you invest in, I think they're focusing first and foremost and in a very intense way around how do you support the talent, not only how do you get them, but how do you keep them. Tech industry has the number one, it's ranked number one for highest turnover rate. The average is a year. So if I'm just going to, jump from Yahoo to Facebook to Google and back again, what am I gaining out of that as an employer? And so I think more people are actually looking at the metric per person and sort of pushing back against it, because they're finding that in order to stay competitive, they have to create a workplace that feels like a place you want to be. And then that's not going to be in a place where you have all these pain points or you don't feel inspired or, there's not a sense of community. And so I think that it's sort of, we've bucked that trend, though it'll still continue to be leaner. And it'll continue to get leaner through sharing programs, which would happen through like mobile working and reassigning of seats.
Well, I was just going to, actually heard this morning for the first time a banker who described the situation where there was actually either regulation or just public market focus on how much they were spending for their real estate, and the actual per square foot number for their employees was meaningful. And I didn't know that was that. I mean, I guess I've always heard that the amount of workspace per employee was decreasing, but I never thought about why that was happening. I honestly seem naive to the fact that that was an economic decision. It was more because it just seemed so like culturally wrong, right? Like these huge offices for executives who were having unused space, and environmentally it seemed irresponsible as well to be sort of dumping so many resources into space that wasn't utilized. So it seems like the reasons, whatever the motivations are, it seems like the results are awesome, because the guy from the bank was saying, now all of us are in one room and we see each other and we're like, you know, more productive and we love our jobs more. So it's interesting that if the motivation truly was economic, that the result is actually a positive thing, you know, and for that to extend to bankers who, you know, we would all think, I mean, actually, a lot of the buildings that we're in are converted banks for whatever reason, like because they're all downsizing. You know, we've been in Bank of America and Chase Bank headquarters and stuff, and they're like brutally horrible. Like they're places that I don't think any human being should be subjected to being in for like more than 4 minutes. So to think that people used to work in there all day is terrible. So I really think that it's a good thing that the economics have changed.
But I think part of that too is that you know, the banks now, their stiffest competition is tech. Yeah. So, you know, somebody who you see as the top talent for, you know, for your tech organization could potentially get poached by a bank who was going to pay them more. But if the space is how you just described, they're going to say, like, hell no. Yeah. You know, so I think with actually, ironically, many financial services companies come to us and say, we're tech companies cloaked as a bank. And we're like, well, you're really not, but we can like look at what that is that's sort of informing those decisions or that desire to be like more like a tech company, and largely it comes from like what you're describing, which is a sense of community and shared purpose, which the closed office really never provided in the same way.
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to add that if I go back to 2 points, you know, I think the value of having an amazing environment that people love is huge on your talent retention strategy and your recruitment strategy. I think people today, it's not, when we had the closed office environment, everything, you sort of got a career and there was a rite of passage and you got treated like shit and you moved through the system and you stuck with it and you did it. That's not the world we work in today. I mean, the people we recruit have many, many choices. They're looking for a place to go that they share kind of DNA with, that is a part of their lifestyle as much as their professional development. So I think people need to look at it through a different lens as the value it brings for talent. I think also the statement that it makes about the company you are. I mean, when we were in our old offices, it was, you know, they were pretty run down, and just seeing the reactions of people walking into the new space and the excitement they have about it and the statement it makes on the type of work we're going to do with them, it has had an enormous impact on our business in a positive way. I think the open plan office thing is, you know, we sit all at the desk, and I personally love it. I can't stand when people say, can you come into this room and talk to me? I say, let's just sit at the desk, because there's a sense of energy that comes from the environment that you just don't get in an office. And, you know, okay, if we have a bad day, that's probably not going to be great energy, but I have to say it's normally fantastic energy, and it really gives you great joy watching it and participating in it. And I think as a leader, you pick up much more behaviorally what's happening. You pick up on things that you need to have a look at that might be potential problems. You have much more exposure to the workflow and issues going on in the workflow. And I think it enables you to be a better, more connected leader.
And what do you do when you need to have a conversation about your company that is maybe not for all of your coworkers' ears?
Well, then I go into one of those huddle rooms. Or get a coffee.
Yeah, actually, I would say, you know, I like to walk around the block to have those conversations, which, I mean, the more we learn about how important it is to not stay at your desk all the time, I think that those are motivating moments to be like, okay, let's change the scene and, you know, walk around the building or walk around the block if the weather's good.
I mean, the irony of the situation is that, like, if you are one of the leaders who only has difficult conversations in your office, like everybody knows that you're having a difficult conversation, and it's not really helping alleviate any of that stress from the person that you're having that conversation with. So, I mean, the thing about open plan is like, unfortunately, it has like a really misinformed name, because open plan to anyone, if you just took it upon first glance, is that it's just an open plan like this, but the reality is that the only way it works is if there's a really good balance of closed spaces or semi-closed spaces that are providing like different levels of privacy that need to be sort of distributed around the office so that they like in real time. Yeah. And that's what you were describing with the desk, which was that you have a mix of spaces as it kind of serpentines along, and or maybe in your WeWork program you have like a typical layout of the way the spaces are organized so that people start to get to know, where and how and when to use them.
I mean, I think for us, we're in an interesting situation because we do have a bunch of small companies that are, mashed together in a very small area. And so the places where it does open up become vibrant with many different activities because all of those companies have their own flow and their own sort of cycle. So you can get the guy sleeping next to the guy meeting with meeting with venture capitalists next to someone having lunch, and that happens really all the time in the same space. And I think that richness actually overcomes the kind of thing that you're talking about, where there's sort of a specific distinction for any one of those activities. It's all just broad, and no one's really too interested in what anyone specifically is doing. I think that's what hopefully. When you have a company where you could have that feeling of like, oh no, I don't want to go into that office because it signals something. If that same conversation was just happening out here in the open, no one would be paying attention. So even if it was sort of a sensitive conversation, no one would even care about it because it would be normal.
You're not skulking around. You don't look guilty. Okay, well, I think maybe at this point we can open up to questions from our audience, see if anyone here has any questions for our panelists.
Hello? Hi. So how do you fight in the open plan setup the headphone syndrome? Everyone's locked in their own audio umwelts.
We were really worried about that when we designed the open plan, because we have a heavy focus on tech products, and we have probably the majority of our largest department is tech and developer, and but I have to say it is most definitely not a characteristic. There is the odd person who puts on the headphones to do something. I guess they're actually, when I walk around, they're listening to streaming things, but it has not become a dominant character in the office. And I thought that was weird. That was one of the concerns, but not at all. And I think it goes back to, appreciating great design. The design of the desk, and people sort of say, what did you do? How did you get to it? Did you just decide to draw the wackiest kind of flowing thing you can find? But no, not really. The design of the desk and the way it goes up and the way it has meeting rooms within it is actually a sound barrier. So when you walk into the space, what you realize is this is a completely open plan office with 125 people in it, but the noise is not anywhere near at the level you would expect it to because of the design of the structure that runs through it. So I think that has, I think if we hadn't have thought through that, we may have that issue a bit more, but we don't have it currently.
It's an interesting question from, in our headquarters, it seems like that would be an obvious solution, and there are people that do have headphones. But for some reason, it seems like people are interacting so much, like it's so collaborative, that there's never like a period of time where everyone has their headphone on. So whether it's people pulling each other over to a different thing to look at code, or in our case also architectural design, or there's so many things that people need to share and discuss that there's never seems to be like a dead time, like a time where so many people have their headphones on. So it hasn't seemed like a problem yet, but where I really have the question, where we are not to that place yet, are in the companies where you have like 100 engineers. And I've never seen that before in real life, so I don't know.
So having done some spaces like that, I think one thing that nobody ever really talks about, which is a really big part of the replacement to that, or the counter to that, is that everybody is just talking on chat. I mean, so you have communities set up where people are talking, they're just not talking aloud. So they're joking with each other, they're saying important things, they're getting information they need, whatever it might be, and they have multiple going on at the same time. And those things are like just sort of a different, medium or forum for that conversation. I think it's okay, personally. I don't know that, if I think the best workspaces are spaces that give people the ability to work the way they want to work. And if that means they have like noise canceling headsets, and they love to listen to like music on its highest decibel, then like go for it. If that's when you feel most productive and you're in a zone, like you should be able to do that. I don't think, you want to encourage people to like tune out, but I sort of don't. I don't see that is even possible anywhere. We're just all so connected. And back to your point about like, people getting up and moving around all day, so frequently, it doesn't last that long. And if you do need to concentrate for 2 to 3 hours, actually, usually we find that people go to like a focus room or a quiet room where you can't even see them. So I would say go for it if you need to.
I think a lot of the conversations that happen out in the open are HR friendly, and maybe the real gossip happens even between people sitting next to each other over IM, at least in my experience at the Slate office. Other questions from the audience?
With services like Pivot Desk, where you can rent space and people are kind of sharing space within kind of an already established culture and larger office, do you guys do anything special to accommodate, additional companies or people working from those spaces?
Usually when we see sharing programs within an organization, there's certainly a zoning that happens. So it's like a very clear indication, like you're a visitor or you're here not on a permanent basis. I think sometimes there's issues with confidentiality that need to be addressed as well. But more often, you're not going to invite somebody in who's you've got that sort of challenge with. That'd be more long term. But I think what we find is that there's some sort of communication tool. I think I had mentioned that earlier. Is this idea that like you need to welcome people into the fabric, because a lot of times the large organizations who do invite a smaller employer in are looking to do that because they want a bit of your energy. They want to sort of like understand what's fueling your fire and like have that rub off on the people that they're employing too. The only way that really works is if you find a way and you feel comfortable sort of mixing in with that, whether it's like in those shared spaces or it's in meeting rooms or it's like in passing by. And so usually that means that you have sort of like I don't know how I say for a back a little word, like somebody who's like a curator for your experience, who's sort of monitoring to make sure that like you're getting ingrained. But most organizations probably wouldn't have that unless you're like a Y&R, for instance, who has somebody who like full time is there to make sure that you're comfortable and equipped, finding your way around.
Sophie, you had mentioned that when you designed your space and surveyed the people in your office that you didn't have any complaints. For the three of you, what's your process for designing great office space?
Our process, so it was actually pretty simple to the way we work on a creative project with a client. So we did the survey pre-going into the design stage. So the process was to find the right space, find the right neighborhood, get that stickiness. That's a really difficult thing. So we found that, and then we did the survey about what was important, and it was, the survey was chunked into sort of more emotional needs and then more functional needs. And then with that survey, we as a team sat down and looked at it, and some of us were very committed to open plan and some of us were not. Were incredibly frightened about it. So we had a lot of discussion about what is the core of the culture of the company. And everybody, when you go from office space or a space that has office, is going to be concerned about going to open plan. I mean, they just are, because they don't like change, right? So our process was to define what is special about our culture. And we really do have a real sense of community, and it's a very democratic culture. Previous office was very much customized by all of the talent. You know, we had TBG radio, we had all this sort of memorabilia of the growth of the company around. So we decided that's where we got to the brief of it would be great if we could all sit at one desk. One table, one big table. So we took that brief and then we said, okay, but there's so many office spaces that look very uniform and bland and dull, and none of our talent's going to deal with that. I mean, they're just going to be like, really? This is where you're putting us? So it was important that if we did do that, everyone sitting at the one table, that this table had character, that it had a life of its own, that when you walked in, it was completely unexpected and very provocative, because that's the type of things we like to make. So that was the brief that we gave our architect. And then the process was, you know, in May we started design, we settled on designs, and then we started to kind of break ground and build in October, and then we moved in late January. We then did kind of a post-survey of everyone's feelings, and that's where we took a temperature check on what people were feeling. But I would say one important thing we did through the process was, you know, we would have I would probably say every second month, we would give people an update on, we've found our location of our new home. Here's where it is. You know, here is the plan, the architectural plan for the desk. I mean, that was a bit scary, because when we shared that with the whole company, everyone was like, what is it? You know, they had no idea. Is it going to work? Like, I think that, but we created a sense of excitement and transparency about the fact that this was going to feel different. This was going to be exciting, and it was coming. So, you know, we ran it like an opportunity to be our own clients on a great creative product for ourselves and the company. Yeah.
Are we all supposed to answer that question? Mine would be much simpler. Not that that's not a process I'm jealous of, but our process up to this point, I would say, has been much more intuitive, like, because we came to it from a very organic angle, like we were trying to solve design challenges from the seat of the entrepreneur or the person, freelancer, creator, who is really at that first moment of creation. We've never, I would say, come to it from a highly conceptual place, and I think hopefully we actually will have that opportunity in some time in the future. But for now, I think we're thinking more about simple things like, when someone is sitting in the office for 14 hours a day, do they feel comfortable and happy? And so when we create the spaces for them and we envision how they are going to walk through it, we're basically putting ourselves in their place and trying to understand that. So and to create those moments of, you know, surprise and excitement and delight along the way. You know, I don't think any of our spaces have ever generated a YouTube video with hundreds of thousands of views like theirs has, which I'm jealous of, but I'll get my chance someday in the future.
So this is my job to do this part, and we do a process that was very similar to what Sophie described, because this is we're always coming at it with new eyes, right? Because it's not our organization we're designing for, somebody else's. The discovery part is by far the most important aspect to make sure that you end up with the right solution, because everybody needs to get behind one big thing and buy into it, and oftentimes it's not something that happens, or consensus doesn't come quickly. It's actually a kind of a good sign, because you're going to do something disruptive that feels uncomfortable. The process to design and build space is not quick. largely, I mean, it's 3 times longer than what a client would imagine who's not accustomed to building space. So imagine then when you move into it, if you designed it for today, it would already feel out of date by the time you're in it. So it needs to be beyond, sort of where you're thinking. And I think that comes from just sort of studying your people and getting feedback, and then collaborating as much as possible around the solutions, and also sort of like being flexible to say like, hey, we failed on this, we've got to change, we've got to try something else, like this isn't working. And for us, it's largely like applying best practices from other people in the same sort of niche of industries and looking at them and what they're doing and what's been successful and iterating beyond that.
Maybe just 1 or 2 more quick questions.
Hi, I'm just curious, where is the need or maybe space for psychologists in this space?
There's actually like entire industry around human behavior, and I think to date it hasn't been widely adopted from a corporate standpoint, though some of the major global employers like blue chip companies are out there really studying what makes people tick, like what makes them happy at work, what makes them super stressed. And you'll see organizations like Deloitte or of somebody of the like that is actually putting a lot of time and effort into giving employees resources to alleviate things that might be caused by work stresses. But I think there's actually probably much more opportunity for there to be study of it and sort of understand and almost predict what responses people would have coming out of scenarios. But largely it's just been data-based and not really, I think, kind of fully pursued.
All right, I think we have to wrap it up there. Thank you all so much for coming.